Welcome to the City Commission joint workshop with the Charter Revision Board. We got a little late start, but I appreciate everyone being here. Do you want to adjust the volume on my microphone? It seems to be a little echoey. It's turning my voice into something more operatic than it needs to be.
Sounds like chaos.
Anyway, we'll get started. Okay, Mr. City Clerk, would you like to call the roll of the City Commission?
Commissioner Herbst. Present. Vice Mayor Glassman.
Here.
Commissioner Beasley Pittman.
Here.
Commissioner Sturman.
Here.
Mayor Trentalis.
Here. We have 100% attendance in the City Commission. Judy, would you like to call the attendance of the Charter Revision Board? Who's that? Harrison Grant Williams is not here. Okay, is that the? So you have a quorum of your board. You don't have a microphone. Oh, this is you kind of need to sit here, folks, because otherwise we can't hear a word you're saying.
Well, I think that city staff.
Push at the bottom.
Okay. I think the city staff did an outstanding job taking all of our work, comprising the cover memo, and supplying you with the documents of everything we've worked on that we have, at this point, been ready to make recommendations to all of you for your considerations. We know we have ongoing work to do, but this is the work that we have spent the last year and a half, basically, on doing, and we present it to you.
Okay, so this report was submitted to us. It's dated May 10th, 2024. I'm hoping that everyone on the commission has had an opportunity to review it. I myself have reviewed it, is this essentially your report? There's no other opening comments you want to make with regard to it? Otherwise, I'll open it up to the commission for their...
I think opening up to the commission, we spent hours and weeks putting this together. Your staff was incredibly wonderful in working with us. You attended a couple of the meetings, so you're well aware of what we were doing during the time. All the minutes of every meeting was always posted on the website. We had Council of Civic Association attending every meeting. So we have very open process. It's shown on YouTube, which is more than years ago it used to do. And this is the compilation of the work that we've done so far that we recommend as the top priorities to start moving forward for the upcoming November ballot.
Okay. Just a quick question. When was this submitted to the Council of Civic Associations? Do you recall? When was your meeting with the Council of Civic
Well, they attended every one of our meetings. So they liked one of our guest speakers. They would invite the guest speaker to attend their meetings.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, I was at that meeting. I was at this last meeting they presented.
It was last week?
They presented. I was there.
And you have to recall, in all past years, it was the same situation where we did the same thing from 2006 to 2018. It was the same process that we used, making sure that the public was always aware, that minutes were always on meetings, and that your staff liaison with the Council of Civic Association always had the full discussions. No different than what you all do with your own district meetings. It's the same process.
Well, I just want to address that really quickly because I'm looking at your minutes from February 2nd, 2023. Vice Chair Furtick observed that during the previous charter review process, there were public meetings in each commission district followed by central meetings. So
That's incorrect.
He was incorrect? Okay.
That was incorrect because the only time they did 4 meetings was prior to 2006, and they basically had no turnout. So in 2006 is when we started asking for the city to actually post us live, because prior to that, it was never even posted live for people to see the actual meetings. So we changed the process so that every month we went up on YouTube. Public always had access. Minutes were always posted.
Okay. Is there anyone in the control room that can adjust these microphones? It's making it difficult to hear the articulation of each word. Am I the only one having that experience? No? Well, we're old, so you can. Excuse me just a minute.
Sure.
Are we better now? Has it been turned down? Down. Needs to be turned down. Okay. All right. All right. With that in mind, then, let us begin. And I guess we'll start with District 1, Commissioner Herbst. Do you have any thoughts or comments or questions from the board that you would like to ask?
So first of all, just to say thank you to everybody that participated. It's a long process. I know, unfortunately, when I was the auditor, I was part of the Charter Revision Board meetings and proceedings, so I've been through quite a few of these through the years, and it's always sad, the lack of turnout. I know oftentimes we were the only ones that were in the commission chambers when we were having these meetings. I remember one time Paul Chettle showed up and we were all in awe that we actually had one person there in the audience. So it's, to a certain extent, it's a thankless job, and I appreciate the time you've all put into it, because despite the lack of enthusiasm from the general public, it really is one of the most critical things that we are doing here. You know, I've always said that the Charter is our Constitution, and we need to be very mindful of making sure that it evolves with us, and when we find things in there that, as Harry Stewart used to say, not a model of clarity, that we make every effort to remediate those things where we're inconsistent with other provisions within the Charter, we're inconsistent with state law, or that we've just found that certain practices no longer work for us. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody for the time you put into it. It's extremely important work, and I genuinely appreciate it. I've followed the proceedings all along. I'm very, very comfortable with everything that you've recommended. Again, I think it brings clarity to certain issues that have come up over the last couple of years, both with respect to residency, with respect to public property. All of those things I think are critically important, and I like the direction that you've moved in, so thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Commissioner.
Madam Chairman, could you come up just for a second? Madam Chairwoman. But by the way, thank you very much, every one of you, for the work you've done here. This was at the last minute you've come together. I appreciate very much what you've done. I was at that. I came in the middle of the presentation at the council. I've heard a little bit, but can I ask, for the benefit of the people who are watching that might not have been at any of these or seen this for the first time, would it be possible just for 5 minutes just to go through a quick outline of what was changed? You don't have a presentation that you could.
I would like to ask Richard, if you want to just give the quick. Richard Weiss, who was John Herbst's appointment. Richard has been involved in the County Charter Commission for multiple opportunities, as well as help assist in writing charters in other municipalities. So we relied a lot upon Richard's input from his knowledge of how other governments operate. So, Richard, if you could just give a quick review.
Push the bottom. Push the bottom.
Once it's red, it's
Where's
on.
it?
There you go. You're on.
Okay. Well, it's very nice to be here. Nice to meet some of you. I think a little background would be helpful. So, at our first meeting, I had suggested that we just go through the charter section by section by section, and deal with deal with Article 1, deal with Article 2, and
There's a lot of cleanup that you said.
there was a lot of cleanup, and there was a very strong feeling on the Charter Review Board that there were some very critical issues that came up as part of the last election, and all of that should be addressed first. Mm-hmm. So what you have in front of you is really sort of the very important issues that the board felt needed to be addressed first, dealing with elections, swearing in, petition process, and some of those things. And so what you have really is a first report. Our intention is, with your direction, and if you want us to, our direction is to basically go back through this, starting with Article 1, and going through and doing all of the cleanup that Commissioner Herbst talked about. There's inconsistent sections. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done. So what you have in front of you is basically were sort of the hot issues that the board felt needed to be addressed right away. And then and our work was really sort of cut short because of the election deadlines and getting things to the clerk and getting things to the supervisor of elections. So what you have is as much as we could get done in the time that we had. So I'm happy to walk you through it. It will take a while. But
Well, that's what we're here for.
One thing that we added, there were some questions that came up through the process. So what we did was we included having speakers from outside of the local government that did not have a particular interest specifically in Fort Lauderdale, but more global outlook. So we had the county attorney's office because most of the public had no knowledge that there are ethics rules that are in the county charter that govern over municipalities. We had the Inspector General to discuss the various issues. Dean was at that meeting where we had all those speakers. We had a gentleman from FAU, who's also the chair of the Ethics Commission in Palm Beach, present to us. He also did a follow-up meeting where he presented specifically to the Council of Civic Association to discuss forms of government, strong mayor, mayor commission. What we have here is the mayor commission with a city manager that works for 5 people. So we had all those thorough conversations on formats of government, ethics in government, as well as just the local charter. So we could see we don't need to have in our charter certain things because it's already there, or if something is inconsistent with state law, such as the special act that governs the elections. We had the attorney for the supervisor of elections and county attorney's office there to explain where there were inconsistencies with state law, inconsistencies with the county charter, et cetera, so that we had a more global look.
So, okay, so let's talk about that for just a second. So Fort Lauderdale belongs to a group of other mayors. It's called the Florida Urban Mayors Coalition, the top 10 cities. We somehow make that cut, okay? And almost all of the mayors are strong mayors in their respective municipality. And I've come to look at the benefits that a strong mayor form of government has in terms of accountability to the people, because the city manager has no direct accountability. And while I would never run in an election requiring us a strong mayor form of government, it's something that probably should have been given more attention and maybe more public input, and let, unlike the county, which doesn't really ever want to put that kind of issue out to the public, I think it's something that deserves a lot more attention, and thinking that perhaps we have grown up as a city and maybe we do need a strong mayor form of government here in Fort Lauderdale.
And I know that was an issue of concern, and we presented it. I know Glassman lambasted us at one commission meeting for even discussing it, saying it wasn't there, but I know that you have requested it. Right. So we tried to look at all the
By the way,
things.
I would ask that you refrain from that kind of language. What did you just say?
You lambasted us.
Glassman lambasted us?
Well, you did.
I find that disrespectful.
Oh, okay, well.
I do.
Yes, and I'd like apologies from you.
We're going to talk about
behavior.
code of conduct later tonight, but I just find that disrespectful.
Well, then I would hope that you would show the same respect to us, because you did do montages attacking me and attacking the work of the charter review. So let's go
that's
back
not
and stay
true.
focused.
That's not true. I showed video clips of you attacking commission members, the mayor, and the city manager. That was a response to what you said at your meeting.
Let's stay focused. I know you
I'm
have
trying
a
to stay
difficult time.
focused.
No, you're not.
Oh, I am.
No,
Here
you're
you go
not.
again. Oh, I am. I'm just saying, let's be respectful.
And
Don't start
let's
off
be
by saying that.
respectful.
And by the way, it's not Glassman. It's Vice Mayor Glassman to you. Thank you.
All right. So going back to the conversation, Dean, you have had those conversations. We had the conversations. We don't have a position one way or the other on it, because, again, all we do is bring back conversation, our discussions, our research, and bring it back to you to make the recommendations, to then go to the voters. And the voters are the ones who have the final say-so. So if it's a conversation that you want to add
It
and
is
adopt, then
it's just
we're
my,
all open for it.
Judy, it's just my opinion. You
Yeah.
know, we haven't really. I would have liked to have had this kind of workshop, months ago, rather than waiting the last minute before we have to put things on the ballot, because it's a real thing. I mean, I even look at the county, and how many people have said, maybe the county. I'll get with you just a second, Richard. Many of us have said, the county needs a real mayor, because in all the travels that I've done with the county mayor and other county commissioners in other parts of the country and even other parts of the world, Broward County is not given the same respect as Fort Lauderdale is given, because it doesn't have a real mayor. It's an honorary position, and I know people are going to disagree on that, but I think that Fort Lauderdale might soon miss out on opportunities and a more efficient functioning of its administration by not having a strong mayor form of government. That's just my opinion.
Mayor, could I ask you a question about that? Because I've actually worked in a strong mayor form of government before. So wherever I've seen strong mayor, it's a full-time job. You can't hold any other outside employment while you do that. So if you think about a strong mayor, is that sort of what you have in mind?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I look at Orlando, I look at Tampa,
Jacksonville,
I look at Jacksonville, all of them. I look at Cape Coral. I mean, they're all strong. I'm sorry? Plantation. Well, Plantation is the only strong mayor form of government in Broward County.
We used to have Lauderdale and Plantation and Lighthouse Point.
And Lighthouse Point, I'm sorry, you're correct. Yeah. So,
I know Lee Feldman used to say that we are the second largest city manager form of government in the state, second only to Tallahassee. I don't know if that's still true or not, but I know at a point in time, I know that was the case.
I don't know.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question in
Yes.
that regard? Let's talk about deadlines. We need to have a deadline to get this on the ballot. That was the impetus of going through.
If we
correct?
decide to put it on the ballot.
Well, the question is, here's the question going forward. Certain cleanup items are sort of necessary, particularly with the last election. Does this committee sunset after they make their recommendations? Do they continue on? Or could it be a two-step process
I would want it to continue on.
Well, here's the question then. Could we come to a conclusion about the items brought forth and then those other things, the other issues? It would have to be a two-referendum process then, or not?
I don't know the answer to that question. Let's just go through this and we'll just see where we are.
Yeah, and again, the situation is that these are the projects that we worked on. And in the past charter review boards, then the commission picks and chooses what they want to put on the ballot to put, and we continue our work. So just because we presented this full document, that's your choice as to what you want to take from our document and our work over the last year and move forward. Dean did attend a couple of our meetings and bring forward some concepts, but again, it's a working document.
Well, the question I have is, it's not a one and done then. So if we pick certain things, we still have another bite at the apple going down. We could bring it back at a later time.
You can always bring it back, and our recommendation is always do it in the November election cycle due to what the cost of elections are, and to work with the supervisor's office.
What is the deadline?
That's my question.
Where's our city attorney?
That might be a David question.
A clerk question?
So the deadline to submit questions to the SOE is June 10th at 5 p.m.
June 10th. Okay. All right. So we have another bite at the apple. Richard, you wanted to say something. Yeah. Please push the button.
Yeah, what I wanted to say was that we really haven't addressed the strong mayor issue. We had a discussion about a presentation about it, but we agreed to, because we only had a certain amount of time, we agreed to defer a full discussion regarding strong mayor and form of government type of issues to a later date where we would have time to really go through it. But I mean, I just wanted to be clear that the Charter Review Board has not come to a position on this. We're not making a recommendation one way or another. We just haven't gotten to it, just like 100 other items that we haven't gotten to. So
okay.
I didn't want it to appear that we had taken a position that there should not be a strong mayor.
I understand. I totally understand that. I guess, like I said, I wish we had this joint workshop, several months ago, so we could have asked the board to address it, to bring it out to the neighborhoods, to go to organizations and get feedback, because now we're going to wait another 4 years. That's I
Mayor,
just think
we could always have.
We could do two.
Right, we could do two.
2 years.
When
right.
we did the Parks bond and the police headquarters, that was not on a municipal election.
No, it was
cycle.
it was an off-year
Right.
election cycle. Yeah,
And we
so-
could do that. And just to dovetail on what you just said,
Yeah.
I have been asking for 7 months to have this joint meeting. I started asking 7 months ago for us to do this because my concern was exactly what the issue is now. We're out of time. There's been no public input. The neighborhoods, the folks, no one really knows what this is. And I just think that for us to just throw something on a ballot without the education that we did, for instance, with the Parks bond, with the police headquarters, just going to the Council of Fort Lauderdale Civic Associations last week, that's not it. And that's why 7 months ago, and I can show you the minutes, I've been asking for this joint meeting so we can start to flesh this out.
Let's just correct something, because
I guess
when
I
it
don't.
came-
I guess I'm done. I'm sorry. I
Yes,
guess I'm done.
because what we did is we bring this recommendation from June till November. November is the ballot. You have that time to educate. No different than what happened with the Parks bond and the police headquarters. That was an issue that the commission brought forward. That was in December. It was on the March ballot. The cost today of a March ballot versus putting it on in November, I don't think you'd want to say to the residents that we want to spend that kind of money for a personal thing instead of waiting until November. The cost, and David has done multiple studies for us on what the cost of elections are.
This is our Constitution. This is very, very important. And by the way,
And I thank Dean for attending the meetings, which were open to any of you who wish to attend the meetings.
Speak.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just find it, by the way, the minutes of, and I've read all of the minutes of every meeting that you've had, it was the chair who actually did say that starting in the fall of 2023, outreach would happen to all of the neighborhoods, to all of the districts. That did not happen. So I'm just saying that that is my concern here. I think the residents will understand if we did put this on a ballot, once this was thoroughly fleshed out, thoroughly discussed, so that people really understand. There's a lot here to digest. There's a lot here to understand. I'm not so sure how prudent it is to put all of this on the ballot where you're going to have a presidential election, you're going to have constitutional amendments, you're going to have marijuana, you're going to have abortion, you're going to have the city elections. We're lucky if folks get to the end of the ballot and vote for a city commission. That's how long that ballot is. I'm not so sure if we need to put this. I don't know what the rush is. In other words, this is serious stuff. This is our Constitution.
Some of it, excuse me, but some of it is sort of cleanup stuff.
Yes.
We might be able to get through to that.
But here's the thing, Dean, as far as the cleanup stuff. This is, no matter what you do, I didn't mean to interrupt you, by the way, for 4 years from now. In other words, there's no rush to get it on November. It's not going to clean up this November's election because that will kick in afterwards.
No, that's correct.
So
but
we don't, we could
going
do,
forward, in terms of, like, for example, swearing us in right after the election, that I think is cleanup language. That shouldn't be controversial. Also, there are a couple of other things that aren't really controversial. Others, I think, are more controversial and need to be fleshed out. But some of this cleanup language, like when the vice mayor takes over, that kind of stuff, that we've already kind of agreed on that anyway.
Right.
So. Maybe I'm going to let
Yes.
Beasley
What I
Pittman
wanted
speak.
to add to the conversation, agreement, the cleanup items. Let's address that. We understand that
Let's do that.
this is deep, this is very intense, and we do need to make sure that our neighbors are informed. But the cleanup, let's do the cleanup. There's no reason to wait for the cleanup.
So why don't we do that? And maybe Richard, if you want to take us through that.
Honestly, other than, I know there may be some debate on some of the issues dealing with how the city disposes of property. There may be some, but the other items, I don't follow Fort Lauderdale politics, so I don't know what would be controversial or not.
We'll let you
but
know.
I think,
You'll find it out.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
okay.
sure I will.
Real quick.
Because, and by the way, I also want to say thank you to the committee for your work. This is not easy work, and I am very appreciative. I have some issues that I'll talk about later in terms of procedure and priorities and how things ended up in front of us. But I agree with what's been said from my colleagues. I think we should just focus on those cleanup items, because the others are just too detailed and complicated, so that I think that that's going to create an issue where we have to be able to educate folks about.
Okay, so let's go, shall we go section by section
Yes.
then? Okay.
It doesn't have to be detailed. I mean, just a bird's eye view for the viewing audience. Is that okay?
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
But,
You want me to do that?
So what page are you starting on?
oh, good.
Starting on page 1.
Of the report.
I'm just going to go through, I'm not going to go through the actual language which is attached to the report. I'm just going to sort of hit the highlights of the topics that we discussed.
Yes.
So the first one was under section 303, qualification of members, forfeiture of office. There were issues about residency and who resides where and all of those kind of things, and we tried to clear that up.
Okay, so let's start with that.
Yes.
You have an exhibit, correct?
Yes.
I mean, what exhibit is that?
I mean, we have the actual language that was drafted, that Paul drafted.
Yeah. Is it exhibit?
Are we looking at the exhibit, or are we looking at the report of May 2nd?
Well, exhibit 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess the one thing I think is missing here is a more complete definition of what a permanent resident is, because that was what it was at issue when John was running, and it became then we were told, well, the state statute and county and all these and case law defines it. So in order for it to be determined, someone has to go to court. And I was kind of hoping that we might be able to reduce that necessity by further defining what permanent resident is or what it is not, okay? For example, should we say that homestead registration is a rebuttable presumption? You know what I mean? I mean, you know what I mean because you're an attorney. But something that gives a little bit more direction to a candidate or a prospective candidate in wanting to know whether or not they qualify. See, just saying a permanent resident, it doesn't quite grasp the entire issue. And so I was hoping that before we put this before the voters, that there'd be some clearer language, because everything else looks fine. You know, it's just that particular phrase, I think needs fleshing out.
Okay, so my response, you and I have discussed this a little bit, and where we ended up was that the case law does define this, and that putting any particular...
It doesn't. Because
it's
the
very
case...
fact specific.
It's very fact specific.
Right.
But if we can give a little further, we have the right to do what we want here
Correct.
in the city, right?
Yes.
So if we can create a little bit more specificity within our own rules, within our charter, we can avoid a contender from having to go to court. I think that going to court is costly, and not that I'm trying to take food out of the mouths of lawyers, because I like lawyers, but I think that there should be some process within our own jurisdiction that we don't have to normally, just say, okay, well, let the judges decide. I think that we should at least give a heads up to any future candidate as to what residency really means.
I mean, first of all, there's nothing wrong with what you've said. It can be done. Where we ended up was, and because there was conversations around the last election about who's qualified and who's not qualified. Where we ended up was that this is not something that the city commission should decide. We said that if there's a question about somebody's qualification to run for office, where we ended up was, then they should go to court.
And I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying we can give a little bit more definition to what permanent resident means, as opposed to leaving it in flux, because the case law, as I recall, gives you certain tests. It's like if you check certain boxes, and then you weigh one over the other. And I just think it delays the administration of this commission by causing that to go into the courts. We don't know how long it's going to take the courts to make a decision, bless you. And it just seems to me that, we want to get right down to business as soon as possible. And if a prospective candidate seems to think like there's a wedge opportunity here to to squeeze themselves in when in fact they aren't a permanent resident, but the cases are so vague that you can make an argument one way or the other. I really think that it's in the betterment of the city of Fort Lauderdale to be able to more fully define what permanent resident is.
We could do that. I haven't ever seen any language. I'm sure it's someplace where they sort of list things. And the problem with listing things, unless you, as you mentioned, like a rebuttable presumption, the problem is with listing things, if they don't own property here, but they rent, they've lived here for 50 years, everything else is here, that could be a permanent resident. And
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah.
Renters are as much a valued citizen as people who own property, right? And in these days, it's hard to own property, especially in Fort Lauderdale.
So just to ask you, if it was a rebuttable presumption, what happens when? Don't you end up in the same situation?
Well, you're right. You end up in the same situation. But we're relying on your expertise to have researched it, to have talked to the community, to have asked the community what they would like to think is a permanent resident, and that's really important.
Well, the second part,
at least on this
clearly
issue.
we didn't do. We didn't go to the community and ask them. As Judy mentioned, we ended up with time issues, and our thought was that if the commission decides to move ahead with this, that you would have public meetings and things but we certainly didn't ask the public what they thought would be a permanent resident.
But they did participate at every meeting by having the representatives from the Council of Civic Association and anyone else from the public that attended, such as yourself. You did raise questions for definitions on permanent. Again, we had the attorneys from the city as well as attorneys on the board that went into thorough conversations and debate on the issue to guide us.
Okay, just bringing that up.
I think I totally understand your point. I just don't know really where to go. Having thought about this a while, I don't know really where to go with it.
Did you talk about 6 months specifically as opposed to, I think Boca has 12 months and other places have 12 months. Was 6 months just always set in stone?
Yeah, we changed it.
Okay. Change it to what?
At least 6 weeks. It's 6 months prior to qualification.
Right.
6 months.
But that's a random number. It could be 7 months. It could be 12 months. It could be
a random number.
But I think some are longer than that. I also was wondering if we ever discussed, by the way, I'm going to refer now to a memorandum sent by Dwayne Spence on February 22nd, 2023, where he outlined the list of items that were suggested for revision by your board. I will say that the report that you've given us has 14 recommendations. Only 2 of them were on the list that we sent back from both Attorney Bolo and then also Dwayne Spence. But on this one, 303, it was included in our list of what we were hoping to get some clarification. Did you ever discuss, because it's on the memorandum, I had once brought up at a conference meeting, perhaps lowering the age to 18 from 21. Was that ever a topic of discussion?
Yes, we did. That's addressed if you read the documents.
Can you pull the mic close to you? I didn't hear what you just said. Could you pull the mic?
I did read the documents, but I'm just
In
wondering
there,
why
it states about if you are eligible to vote. Chris, do you want?
Yes, but I'm just saying that needs to be really cleaned up so that it's specific.
It's in there.
Dean, I just wanted to address the permanent resident issue.
Yeah, could you please?
And we did have a pretty long debate on this. In fact, I think
I was there for it.
Yes, but it went over to other meetings. It wasn't just one.
Okay,
yes.
yeah, okay.
And it was the consensus of the committee that if we try to put together a definition, that definition would be attacked by the court because, as you're aware, case law has a multifaceted that you give weight to different things, but it's always up to the trier of fact to determine which weight he's going to give to homestead, to driver's licenses, as to how long you've lived, what circumstances. So we felt that if we would put in a definition, that definition would be attacked rather than just keeping it as permanent resident, which has been the subject of quite a few cases.
Well, even the phrase permanent resident can be attacked, right? So why would we think that was sufficient?
Because permanent resident is a term that is used by the courts already.
I understand that, but even if you were to put it in a footnote, even if you were to put in a footnote, some of the elements of determining permanent residents include A, B, C, D, and E. You know what I'm saying? This gives a potential candidate some indication as to their eligibility ahead of time, rather than thinking that they're going to have to hire, a lawyer, an elections lawyer, to try to come up with a case. It delays the administration of this commission. It could delay it for months. I look at some cities that they're going through this, and they're without a commissioner for months. Okay, and they have 4 people or 6 or whatever the even number is, and they're without, and it's hard to get through. That's all I'm worried about. I just want this commission to be able to function fully at all times.
Mayor, can I weigh in on this, since it pertains directly to me, since I was the victim of this at the last time? So I had met every qualification that's on the list of permanent resident, and that did not stop me from having to hire a lawyer to defend myself in accusations of not being a resident. So the problem isn't the definition of residency. The problem is how you adjudicate the issue of residency.
Yes, I agree with you.
So
but if we have a more defined definition, I know that sounds redundant. If we have a more specific definition, it helps us and it helps the potential candidate in knowing whether or not they're eligible. If they,
I knew I was eligible. I mean, so there's a whole long list here of get a driver's license, register your vehicle, register to vote, have a lease or own property, have utility bills, bank accounts, don't claim residency anywhere else. I did every one of those things, and I was still challenged. So defining that is
well,
not.
You did have one thing and this is not really about you, John. I don't want.
Well, no, it is.
I don't want. It's not about you. I'm trying to.
No, respectfully though, this came up as a result of the challenges to my residency, wherein it was determined that this might perhaps be an area that was problematic. It certainly proved to be problematic in my case. And what I'm simply saying is that even when you meet every single definition that there could possibly be out there for residency, somebody will still challenge it.
Well, in your case, you did have homestead in another city,
which you don't drop until the end of the year. In fact, you cannot drop it until the end of the year, which I verified with the property appraiser, and I made that point known. You simply cannot drop your homestead until the end of the year, which I did at the end of the year.
Okay, I'm just saying.
I'm just saying as well.
Okay, but I'm just saying that in trying to determine permanent residency, it's more helpful to have a better definition in the charter than to just leave it in the air, up in the air, for others to decide. And anyway, I don't want to belabor this right now. We don't have to approve or disapprove anything. I just want to bring this up. Okay.
I mean, just to try to come up with something that, I mean, you could have a footnote that says indicia of residency include but are not limited to. The problem is if something's on the list, a judge could look at it and say, oh, the commission thought that was important. But the problem is once you start listing things, then you start eliminating things. And I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying. Somebody wants to qualify for, I'm not talking about a case where there's some, malintent or something, but just somebody trying to qualify for office. What do I have to do? And
that's what I'm thinking.
Right.
Which include but not be limited to. That's helpful. I mean, even in other contexts, that's helpful because it helps those trying to make a decision, whether it be a trier of fact or whether it be a candidate just trying to weigh their eligibility, to understand, what the charter is looking for in determining eligibility. I just don't want someone showing up at the doorstep on the last day of qualifications saying, I'm qualified, and then it says, yeah, I've been a permanent resident. Well, for how long? 6 months?
But the way we ended up with that is that even if that person shows up, the clerk can't be an investigator who registered.
That's the point.
And so they end up in court. And if somebody wants to challenge it, they end up in court anyway. And so you end up in this case law definition of permanent residence.
But if you have the included but not limited to, and a candidate like John could go through there and say, okay, boom, 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 I checked the box. That would deter a challenge because he's met the minimum requirements set forth in the charter.
The majority of the court requirements. It's really
if you have a limited to whatever is set forth there, it might avoid litigation in the future.
Well, Commissioner Herbst's example, he probably had He had he checked off almost every single
But
box.
Richard, this isn't about John.
No, I understand.
This is about going forward, okay?
Well, John revealed the kink in the armor. It's not John himself. Now we have to deal, not John, we have to now deal with the kink, is what it is.
I have a question. City Attorney, so have you had a chance to review all of this? Because a lot of this is, in my opinion, very much needed to be reviewed by our legal. I know that there were some disagreements of opinions with regards to that special election from our legal department when we were being advised. So there are definitely issues here. Have you had a chance to go through this language and weigh in on how you feel about the way it's written and presented to us?
I think you all know that Paul Bangel, the most senior attorney in the city attorney's office, accompanied and was present for all these meetings. So I've relied upon him and had discussions with him, and then I've read these documents. I've gone through this a number of times in former cities. I never had a challenge to a residency thing. I know Richard, working for Weissarota, what they did, Weissarota would create charters for cities that didn't have them, and then hopefully would, in the end, get that city to be a client. But he has an inordinate amount of experience in this matter. So,
But
I have read it.
Paul's not with us today, though, unfortunately. So I just want to make sure that we are getting total approval that this cleans up any kind of discrepancy that we saw when we went through that issue. And I just wanted to make sure that our legal department has thoroughly vetted this and feels comfortable with all of this language as presented.
Yes.
Paul was there. The few meetings that I attended, Paul was there. He was asked questions. He got back to the board with responses to ensure that there was a proper context to going forward in some of these issues. But all right, let us keep going. And
I just wanted to say to Commissioner Glassman that Paul drafted all of this language.
Okay.
And I did work closely with Paul, but Paul drafted all of this language. We spent hours and hours together going through this. But
Thank you.
Paul did an excellent job on this.
Thank
And
you.
by
That's
the way,
very helpful.
with Richard's expertise, we have Richard as the point person to work with the staff prior to every meeting to make sure that every item that came forward to us for the agenda was reviewed by two sets of eyes between Paul and Richard so that everything had complete input, and then Paul would rewrite and bring back to us rewrites and rewrites and rewrites and bring it back. So they were intimately involved in the whole drafting of every piece of document.
and Chris
that you're
too.
looking at.
I mean, Chris was involved
Yes.
too. So,
Yes, Chris too.
Commissioner
I'm just saying that
Glassman, I
Richard
just
worked
wanted
before
to
the agendas came out.
clarify on the age issue. What we did was we took out the 21, and we said they had to be an elector, which is 18 years old. And so
Right,
that's
and that language is in the section for mayor, but I guess then you didn't need that language on the section for city commissioner because you just said elector, right?
Well, yeah, the elector is 18 years old, so that's why we.
Yeah, I guess in the original charter language, 21 was only mentioned for mayor. I guess that's specifically those words from what I've been able
we
to
need an
read.
18-year-old mayor here. Clean up this act.
Right.
So
No, I understand.
that's the way we dealt with it.
Yes.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
so the first one was dealing with qualifications of members. Okay, the second one was judge of elections, and this goes back to the issue we were just discussing, where the city commission under the prior charter end up being the judge and jury and dealing with qualifications. And our consensus was it was best to take that away and let it go into the courts and let them decide, as opposed to what you previously had. It's a significant change, but it's sort of the way that we felt that we could sort of remove
It's where the commission was going to be the tribunal, so to
Yes,
speak, as
exactly.
opposed to a judge.
Yeah.
So, and I totally agree with that.
So that's 3.04.
And Richard, is that pretty common with other cities as well, that they would not have this kind of language for judge of elections and putting that in the hands of the
They all
commission?
have, every single charter says that the commission shall be the judge of its own qualification of its own members. But anytime that the commission or the council has gotten involved in reviewing this stuff, it always turns into a mess. It turns into a mess. And in most cases where we're the city attorneys, and there generally is a court challenge, and we tell the city commission or council just to stay away from it because it's in the court. So they don't end up making that decision.
What about using the county's elections board to qualify people? Does that make sense?
It's an option.
It's an option, yeah. All right, we can think about it. Okay.
So again, only because I wanted to know where this came from, what I've been doing for the last, I guess, week or so is looking at the list that we actually had compiled from Dwayne Spence's memorandum of February 22nd. And then Anthony Fajardo sent another list also in January of 2023 where he had a whole list of items that he was recommending. In fact, the document's entitled Charter Revision Board Proposed Charter Amendments. So this language, 304, has never made either Anthony Fajardo's list.
It's really it was an item that came up from us as a result of what happened. But again, just to put it in perspective, we never intended that this be just a first shot. I always intended, because that's what I've always done, that we go through the entire charter. So I wasn't particularly concerned when we got to the items on the list. But what happened, because of the timing, we ended up dealing with these hot button items, and that's why many of the items on the list, we just didn't have a chance to get to them yet.
No, I understand. I was just trying to figure out where exactly some of these came from, because I didn't see them on anyone's list, whether it was the commission, whether it was Dwayne Spence, whether it was Assistant City Manager Anthony Fajardo. So I've seen a lot of those where we have them presented by you in this report, but I never saw them bubble up from anybody previously. That's all.
If you looked at the history of any charter review board, the charter review board acts independently, where we will go through section by section of the charter. We are not contained or responsible for any one specific person's dream. We are to look at, as an independent board, the charter as a whole.
Well, wait a minute. It doesn't really work that way, Judy.
No.
You're not independent of the commission. You
We are
are an
as far
advisory
as-
board. Wait, let me finish. You're an advisory board to the commission, and the commission has a right to submit recommendations as to what the advisory board should
Absolutely,
consider and
which is not
investigate.
limited to that. And that's what I'm saying about being independent. We have the right to look section by section by section, which is what we were choosing to do.
Right, but some of these items aren't even in the sections because they were never part of our charter. So that's why you can't just limit yourself to section by section by section. There are things we would want to add, like, for example, strong mayor or any of the other things. Like,
Correct.
I
We
mean,
are on, as we've said.
Yeah,
We're
I get
ongoing,
that.
and we took it, as Richard said, we started with section 1 and just started going section by section by section through the charter.
But it doesn't look like we
just
got
not
this section
limited.
by section by
We're
section.
just not limited to specific
No,
memos.
just to clarify, I would have liked to do it that way, but we didn't. What we did is we dealt with the issues that the charter board members felt were hot button issues. For my personal, had there been, when I was appointed, some memo to me that said, Richard, go look at these issues first from the city commission, I would have done that, but I didn't ever get that memo.
I don't understand how you didn't get the memo. And here, I really either need to find this out from Dwayne Spence or our city attorney, because I'm looking at a memorandum from Dwayne Spence that lists the items that basically, and his memorandum was February 22nd, 2023, addressed to honorable mayor and commissioners. I can't imagine why your board wouldn't have received these, but it says the following is former city attorney Alan Bowe's list of charter sections that should be addressed.
Right.
And then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, there are 8 items.
Commissioner, I'm distinguishing between something that we got from your staff and something that we got from the committee. We looked at that. I did see that memo and the other one, but I'm saying I never saw one from the city commission that said, deal with these items. We saw one from Dwayne.
That is correct.
Yeah,
that is correct.
Had I seen, me personally, had I seen that, I would have said, okay, this is what they want us to do first.
But that gets back to the Vice Mayor's original point, which was it would have been great if we had a meeting before now to be able to give that, transmit to, because we collectively have not had that conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
But also, I think was the board ever presented with the items that were titled, again, from our Assistant City Manager, Anthony Fajardo, and it's, again, items that pending review by Charter Review Board, and then the sections. And he lists the documents called City of Fort Lauderdale Charter Revision Board, Proposed Charter Amendments, and he goes through the whole charter and he comes up with 45 items, actually.
Who's this?
Anthony Fajardo.
Yeah,
I'm
Anthony,
looking at that
yeah,
document.
that's what I
And,
thought.
and out of the 45 items, you addressed 10.
I can't respond to everything. All I can tell you is that every section of the charter needs to be looked at. We did see those memos. The charter board, when we convened, there were some hot button issues dealing with elections, qualifications of members, disposal of real property, some things like that, and that's where the board voted to go first.
The reason I ask this is because what we're trying to do now is focus on cleanup, which I think is what we should be doing. But Mr. Fajardo's memorandum and his items to be addressed by your board, there are actually two sections, one that says review for cleanup and one that says review for substance.
Right.
And on the review for cleanup, he's got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 items review for cleanup, only 2 of which you are presenting to us out of 11.
I have about 30 items. I mean, in
For cleanup.
every single, well, I think that there's 2 different types of cleanup. One cleanup is sort of hot button issues that need to be addressed maybe before the next election. I think that's one way to use the term cleanup, and I think that's what we're talking about. The other ones are grammatical things, state law things, those kind of things, which absolutely need to be addressed, but we haven't gotten to those things. So this is sort of hot button cleanup, and the
Well,
other
it's
one,
initial. Some of it's not hot button. Some of it's pretty straightforward.
somebody sort of came across as we were going through the sections, and we figured we'd just take care of it while we were there. But
So, Susan, can you make sure that everyone on this commission has all these documents that I'm referencing? I just think it's important that we're all on the same page, and maybe even the Charter Revision Board, just so that everyone has what I've been looking at for the last week in terms of really understanding what the commission has brought forth, what Dwayne presented as items needing cleaning up and substance, and then what Anthony Fajardo issued in memorandums as needing cleanup and also for substance. I just want to make sure that everyone has all of this stuff so we're all reading together.
We can do that.
Thank you.
Commissioner, now that we're having the discussion and we are here, for me personally, I think for the board, if there's particular items going forward, I mean, going back, we did what we did and whatever, and but going forward, if there are particular items the city commission would like us to deal with, somebody needs to put it in form of a motion and tell us what you'd like us to look at, and I guarantee you that we will.
And I appreciate that. So these items that you did present to us, what was the driving force behind them? In other words, was your board?
Yes.
The board was unanimous in presenting all of these forward to us?
There was 1 or 2 items where I actually voted against one of the items, and I think you voted against one of the items. But basically, in the beginning, when we first started out, there were a bunch of issues dealing with elections, dealing with disposal of property, dealing with the referendum issue, that the board felt were sort of very important issues that needed to be dealt with first. And so the board had a consensus that we were going to deal with those 3 areas, sort of elections, qualifications, referendum, and disposal of property, because the board came to a consensus that we were going to deal with those issues first. And so that's where this report comes from. We dealt with those issues first.
Why the focus on where the city manager lives and all of that? I read so much about the city manager.
Yeah,
I didn't see that on any of the items that we either sent forward as a commission or city staff, but it seems to have been a big topic in your meetings.
Some of these items, as we were going through a particular section, we might have been focused on Section A, but we also was presented with Section B, so we looked at them and said, okay, so let's talk about this now. It was not a all or nothing kind of process. But I will tell you that there is, certainly from my point of view, I have no hidden agenda here on my part. We just were going through this as decently as we could, having discussions about them, and there was no intention to ignore what Dwayne had said or what Anthony had said. It's just we just didn't get to it.
Okay, and Anthony was in attendance of all of our meetings, working with us. We had city staff at every meeting.
All right, well, we'll get to that point.
Okay.
Right now, we're just, where are we now?
3.05.
Okay. Designation of vice mayor?
Right, it talks about, it just cleans up the process for designation of vice mayor when there's a municipal election, or when there's someone doesn't complete their term. So that was a cleanup.
So transitionally, so the vice mayor was just appointed in April. So what would happen is that would the vice mayor then have his term truncated because the November election?
Generally, what happens with these charter amendments is there's what's called the transition section at
Right.
the end, and you talk about specifically that. With respect to Section 3.04, notwithstanding the language of 3.4, the current vice mayor serving shall serve in office until a particular date. After that, it reverts to what's in the charter.
Right, so that isn't addressed here, is it?
The transition is not addressed.
Right.
No, there's not a transitional section here.
So let's talk about it. What are your thoughts, Vice Mayor? I mean, this would truncate your term to the end of the year as opposed
Well, if you remember, when we moved our elections to November, we all truncated our commission terms.
Well, that's true.
So, you know,
I got
it is-
truncated the first time, too.
Yes. Commissioner Sturman was truncated.
big truncate.
We've all been truncated.
Okay.
So, you know, what's another round of truncation?
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with whatever of these charter amendments you decide to move forward, if any.
Yeah.
There's no problem in drafting a transitional section that deals with some, consequences of just the ones that you're doing. There's nothing wrong with that.
And to me, this is not the most important thing facing us and our charter.
No,
That's
I
all.
understand, but I'm just bringing it up because I think
Yeah.
it's an open item, and I would like to get some clarity on it. So, right now, the way it reads, or the way it's being recommended, is that the next vice mayor will be chosen at the end of at the first meeting after the November election in 2024. Is that correct? Okay.
Well, you could always decide to make it 2028 if you wanted to, and then this way everybody would do their thing until then. I mean, that's a decision people can make. But
Okay.
Whatever.
That would be in a transitional section.
Exactly. No problem.
3.08 deals with the fact that state law covers the issue of forfeiture of office if somebody's convicted of a felony, and there was some language in the charter that we felt was really unnecessary because the governor has the power to suspend people, and putting the city commission in that position is just awful.
So I never knew this. So if a person misses 4 meetings in a row, it makes them eligible for being terminated. It's not automatic.
That's the way. Yeah, that's
Because
the way
we can excuse that absence by the commission. But it's consecutive meetings, not 4 in a year.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So you can't disappear for 2 months.
Although tempted.
Right, and that section is intended to deal with illness or infirmity or some other family circumstance, so that there is some ability for the commission to be lenient with respect to one of its members, as opposed to an automatic. Some communities have, you miss 3 meetings in a row, you're done.
3 strikes and you're out.
3 strikes and you're out.
Okay.
Is the stricken language because you're just saying, well, the governor has the ability to remove someone from, that's it, totally?
That's
But do we want to rely on just that? I mean, what if the governor doesn't? Or what if, I mean, are we saying that it's okay to be convicted of a felony and still serve? If the governor, what if you're the best friend of the governor and the governor doesn't remove you? I'm just saying that, I mean, I don't know that, but like,
Well,
what
it's a
happens?
good point.
Huh?
It's a good point.
Why should we just leave it up to the governor? Why shouldn't we set that policy ourselves?
Yeah, why was that taken out then?
Because of the power of the governor,
But
but
it's not certain.
no, it's not certain.
It's
No.
not guaranteed that a person will be convicted of a felony and be
Correct.
removed by the governor.
Correct.
So why don't we make it?
A typical example of a felony might be something like, a person having voted when they shouldn't have voted, even though they're on the voter registry, that whole situation that took place. Those folks that were once had their voting rights taken away from them, and then they were reinstated, and then they voted, and then the governor decided to cite them for felonious conduct for voting, even though their name was on the voter registration list.
So the way that your current section reads is if somebody's convicted of a felony, they forfeit their office even if there's an appeal pending. That's the way your current language reads. It says
But if they're convicted of a felony.
convicted of a felony, notwithstanding any appeal or right of appeal he or she may have.
Well,
So that's what.
Maybe the appeal part can be left in. I mean, we should give everyone a right to appeal. I don't know why. I agree with the vice mayor. If a person's been convicted of a felony and they have the appeal rights, I think that notwithstanding any appeal or right to appeal should be omitted. But that first part of the sentence, honestly, sometimes they play games with these indictments.
On this one, I'd like to hear what. Unfortunately, Paul's ill, but I would like to hear what Paul has to say. But I understand what you're saying, and there's certainly nothing wrong with leaving some of that language in.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
So does this, if somebody's, it's not accused but convicted of a felony, they automatically are removed, or we have the right to remove
Under your
them?
current charter, they're automatically removed.
Automatically.
And do you want us to? I mean, depending with felonies, there's certain things that are unacceptable, and certain things that just. I mean, is that something that we want to have the ability to remove, or is it an automatic?
That's why we sort of. Does the commission want to say, "Oh, this is a good felony and this is a bad felony"? So, this
Well,
there's
different degrees of felonies, but I'm just saying that the right of appeal is a constitutional right, and we're basically saying we're taking away their right to hold office, even though they have yet to fulfill their constitutional rights. So,
But I think the governor does that on a regular basis. If you've been accused of a felony, I believe the governor pretty much automatically suspends you from office. Yeah,
even if you're not convicted.
Yeah.
Right.
And then if you are cleared of whatever you've been accused of, you can be reinstated back into your office. And this has happened. It's happened several times, and locally, as a matter of fact. I remember a case just a couple of years ago where the individual involved was able to be reinstated as mayor.
But it's not an automatic. You have to.
Yeah, but I think the vice mayor's point is well taken, though, because those kinds of things can be politically motivated.
Yes.
And someone's removal because they were just indicted as opposed to convicted, it could be politically motivated. And here we have a conviction. Again, we're denying them their constitutional right to appeal and still maintain their right to hold office. I don't
But I don't know that there's a right to hold office.
It's not a big thing for me, but I'm just saying I hope that no one on the commission would be, a convicted felon.
But this might come up a year, 2 years, 10 years from now. So it's not necessarily applies to us.
Well, I assume it's not applying to yours truly.
We had the issue recently where a school board candidate ran for office, won the office, could not be seated because he had pled guilty and had been adjudicated guilty. Never went back and had restoration of rights. So when we discussed...
This was a school board member?
It was Rodney Velez down in Hollywood. Ran, won, but then couldn't be seated. And the issue was because he never had his civil rights restored. So we looked at all these different cases that we knew took place here locally and places that looked around the state and felt that this was the cleanest way, knowing what would be more consistent with what was going on with Tallahassee. It didn't matter which governor because it dates back to the same actions, whether it was Lawton Childs or moving forward. The county charter would be to our benefit and have less writing than more writing would be the way to do it.
Yeah, and all these items, you're not going to vote today to put something on the ballot or not on the ballot. So I think if there's questions that you have of Paul, when he gets back and before you make a final decision if or which items you put on the agenda, any of these items can be changed if the commission wants to put a different item on the ballot or leave it the same. So it's just sort of an interim step that we're doing.
I personally think that a person should have their appeal rights, and even if they're convicted, they shouldn't be removed until they've exhausted their appeal rights. I mean, look at the national level. We have a former president who is criminally charged, and yet he's still running for office. So if he's elected and still convicted, is he eligible to serve?
That's a very good question.
You're right.
Oh, but I think, Mayor, I think the flip side of that, though, is if you continually run appeals, you can run out your entire term of office while you're appealing something, only to be convicted at the end. So I think holding office. Hold on. I think holding office is a privilege. It's not a right. Nobody has the right to office. We have a privilege, and that privilege can be revoked. So I understand your point about the right to appeal, but there is no right to hold office. There's it is a privilege. We talk about that all the time, right? We have the privilege of serving our residents. It's not a right.
Well, that's just for the audience to hear.
So they feel better about it, right? Okay.
It's an honor and a privilege. I don't know if that's the legal definition, but yeah, Tom,
Mayor, I wanted to point out-
help us through this.
I wanted to point out that when you talk about being convicted of a felony, you now are aware that there are 3 degrees of felony. And every year in the legislature, new things come in as 3rd-degree felonies, which are not serious, but they're serious enough to merit going from a misdemeanor raised by the...
And impact their ability to hold office, in our view. I mean, like...
I'm not disagreeing with you.
But to go with what John said, you're innocent until proven guilty. When you're adjudicated, you're proven guilty, and you could appeal it. But, I mean, it is a milestone that I don't think anybody would fault us using that as the line.
And that's why we sort of left this to the
Why don't we
governor's
move away
office.
from this one for a moment?
Okay.
Now let's think about that. Okay.
Go ahead.
Organizational meeting.
This dealt with, this was part of the whole election, when somebody gets sworn in and all that, and we think we cleared all this up, so it's very clear when the organizational meeting is, when somebody gets sworn in, all of that, to avoid that.
And this was my recommendation before about qualification. Instead of it going to a court, maybe we can impose the issue upon the Broward County Canvassing Board to see whether or not permanent residency was established. Just a thought, putting it in the hands of somebody else if they're willing to accept that responsibility. But as you have it here, I don't see anything controversial about this.
Okay, so 310 is covered by the prior section. Okay, 313. Some of this, if I recall, is in some of your procedures, and there was an issue about the conference meetings and the meetings at 6 o'clock, and so we just felt like we should clarify some of this. And this requires that there be a meeting on the first and third Tuesdays of each month, or on the succeeding Wednesday if there's a holiday. It can be rescheduled by the commission, but it basically sets up a regular meeting schedule. This is totally discretionary on your part as to what came into effect. This came up was as a part of the swearing-in process, because we're saying that it's going to happen at the first regular meeting following the election, and unless you define when the regular meetings are happening,
right,
then the first, quote, regular meeting there could be room for discussion about when the meeting is. And so that's why we pin down the regular meetings. Again, just for you to consider.
Okay. Oh, and go ahead.
Sometimes I don't know if this is going to make it too inflexible for us, because sometimes we have changed meetings, but not necessarily to the succeeding Wednesday. This is very specific.
Well, we have here that you can reschedule your meeting dates. There's a separate. It says if it's on a holiday, the Tuesday, then it goes to Wednesday, but you can also reschedule.
As long as it's up to the commission.
Yes.
I mean, because we've done it on a Thursday before.
Yes.
And also, the commission may by motion eliminate regular meetings for 1 month each year to provide for vacations.
And that's the summer.
Well, 1 month each
Oh,
year.
we usually
do
do
it
six-
2 months. We do July and August.
Yeah, it's true. We do the second meeting in July, and the first meeting in August we don't meet.
And so this would prevent us from doing that. So that doesn't work.
Right.
Well, I believe what your staff gave us as far as input is you usually have the meeting the first week of July, then you go on the break. So based on the weeks that they determined for us is where we came up with that, because it's like almost the second meeting of July doesn't happen, the first meeting in August doesn't happen. So that's where we came up with the...
So this would eliminate our ability to...
No, this would it was giving you the opportunity and just clarifying it.
Well, from
says
my reading, it
eliminate.
doesn't say that. It just says we can do it once a year, but not twice. And I would like to keep things the way, I personally would like to keep things the way they are.
The only thing that I feel strongly about is that I think that a regular meeting should be defined so that it dovetails with the swearing-in process, and you can't have that kind of issues.
There's no dispute with that. That's not what we're talking about. We're just
can-
talking about the ability to keep the schedule we have now, which is to meet the first meeting of July, and then the second meeting date in August.
You could just, you can.
Could I jump in on that? Because if you recall, Mayor, actually the second meeting, the first meeting in August is a fairly new invention. Historically, there was no meeting in August. We came back in time for the September meeting. So the break was traditionally...
Well, that's true.
Right. The break was traditionally from roughly about July 10th until, first meeting in September after Labor Day. So we instituted this a couple of years ago. Candidly, I'd rather see it go back to the September meeting. I don't like the August meeting. I never have liked the August meeting.
Go to your villa in Tuscany.
It's my villa in Tuscany exactly awaits, and it misses me when I'm not there. So
The county does not till September, right? Don't they?
No, they just do what we do. They
The
just do
state
it
law
earlier.
requires that you have your budget meetings in September.
Right.
Which we do. And this was something I believe Lee Feldman instituted, was to bring everybody back in August to talk a little bit more. But I candidly would prefer that we go back to what has historically been the case, where we have our first meeting in July, where we adopt the not-to-exceed millage, which is required by the charter, and then we come back in September and we have our public hearings and we adopt the budget. I much prefer that. So I would rather us not be back in August.
We're a busy city now, and I think we need that extra meeting. I personally think we should come back at
Well,
least.
it's helpful when you have young children too. So we may not all be in a position where we have young kids in school and want to take summer breaks and have other things going on. But again, that has been our practice for most of the history of the city, and I think it worked just fine.
I'll ask you a question going back to the urgency to have the timing of the meeting, in particular the urgency to have a meeting after the election, that first meeting where we, quote, get sworn in. If we're going to redefine it and the supervisor election is going to have a say, we actually now have qualified, we've won the election at that point. I know that several people have gone to, technically, when do you take office? They've had like a judge or whatever has given them the oath. Do you have to have that meeting then, or when do you actually assume office?
What the city was inconsistent with the state law of which is the special act that governs elections here in Broward County. Under that special act, it states specifically when you have to be taking office, and that's why we had Nate Klitzberg attend our meetings to guide us through that. And that came up with, I think it was within 10 days of the certification.
But at that time, our city attorney was telling us that we were not inconsistent.
Right.
But so let's say
that's the discrepancy here that we need to solve.
If you read the following meeting, he corrected the record on it at the following meeting.
But here's my question to you. Let's say within that 10-day window, for whatever reason the candidate wants to assume office, do they have to wait for the city commission to meet, or can they be sworn in?
Under the state law, you can take your oath of office that night if you have someone to give it to you.
But my point is, you don't necessarily have to have a rush to have that next meeting, because you can assume office.
Exceeding what the state law, which is the special act that governs the Broward elections.
We were just trying to add some specificity to this so that the issue of, I got sworn in, last night by this, so that there was a specific cadence to when things happened, because we thought that was a sort of a healthy thing and very predictable, and would eliminate, maybe some of the issues that happened last.
But we think we've done that now, right, with this cleanup?
With this?
With
everything.
Yeah, but also on this one also, because it involves your special act, which I'm less familiar with, Paul might have a comment on this too.
But also, the other issue about the regular meetings was based on a recent issue last year with a petition drive, and when did it go to the commission. So when it was identified as a regular meeting as being the conference meeting where you cannot take action or do not take action, what defines regular meeting? And that was part of the discussion as well.
All right, so getting back to the original discussion, right after the election, what's the date of the election this year? November what? 5th. So then the next regularly scheduled meeting of the city commission would be the 19th.
Did we change the November 5th date of our meeting? Because that's election day.
We haven't done that yet.
Because that's election day.
Yeah, but let's just say it's the 19th.
Right.
That's the next meeting.
It would be we push it back a week.
But that won't work for the second meeting.
See, November elections, unlike March elections, have a different certification timeline with the supervisor's office. So with the November elections, it's what, within 5 days, Chris? That following Friday?
What, to certify the results? Yeah, but I mean,
So
they-
that
they
was
would
where we
definitely
were going
we kind of
in
all
counting.
know, unless it's like, like last time we had, I mean, even when the first time I was elected, it was, very close. But
That was March.
But the thing is that,
Different rules.
right. But in this case, November 5th, the next, and I guess we'll probably not meet November 5th. We'll probably meet
Mayor.
November 6th. 1 second. So we'll probably meet November 6th, right?
We,
No.
November
we
7th.
we had moved the meeting already
changed-
to,
Wait,
to November
David?
7th.
Wait, David wants to speak.
In my calendar. It's official.
Yeah, we moved it to November 7th for the,
Already.
We did
from
move it to
Tuesday to
7th.
Thursday to take it
Okay.
off of the election day. And
We
then the
moved it to
next one would be the
7th. Okay,
19th.
that's Thursday, right?
Correct.
Okay, so the following, the second meeting would be the 19th.
Yes.
Right.
But that's why I'm a little uncomfortable with some of the specific language of the Wednesday. I just think we need to clean this one up. It's just.
All right, so we're not ready for this one.
It's because, how are we defining regular meeting? Do we want to discuss further what Commissioner Herbst mentioned about timeline? When do we come back?
All right, so
also,
we're
Well, here's
what's-
a question,
all right,
Dean.
what
If you're going to be
is-
meeting that Wednesday or Thursday, is it the old commission or the new commission that's going to be convening?
Well, the new commission.
Well, you can't have it. It takes 5 days for them to certify the election. So you're setting yourself up for a problem.
No,
Right.
it's
You're doing
5
November
days.
7th,
No.
it's the old commission.
The
What?
old commission.
It's
So
the
after
old
the election happens.
The old commission meets on the 7th, yes. The
So
new
no, but
commission meets
there's
on.
an election, and the old commission still meets one more
On
time.
the 7th.
Correct.
So, okay, unless you don't want to do that, you just want to,
Cancel.
just cancel that meeting. Well, what purpose would you have for that meeting?
I think that the new commission is not ready to meet so quickly.
So you offset it by a week.
But we can't cancel according to this.
That's what I'm saying. You have to anticipate.
All right, so let's think about this.
Yeah.
We have another meeting we can think about this. Okay. Let's move on to 3.15.
Okay, 3.15 is a total rewrite of your initiative and referendum process. The intention of this was to try to make it very clear and also to make it user-friendly. That was the sort of feeling of the board.
So to summarize this, the way I understand it is that 10 people can put together a petition, and they can submit it to the city commission. And if they want to get it on the ballot, they need 1% of the registered voters to be able to put that on the ballot, unless the city commission itself does so. So what is 1%? How many registered voters do we have? Is that the number? Is that the real number?
Was 1,200 1%? I think that was the number floating around.
We only have 120.
132,000 voters, so 1% of
1,300, then,
132,000.
1,300.
Riley, what's the answer?
I mean, seems fair to me. I mean,
Just as a little
10 people,
background,
though?
this section works.
well, the
two-
10 people is just to be able to start the
Yes,
petition.
to circulate.
Yeah.
This works two ways. One is to repeal something that the commission has already adopted, or initiate a change and a provision that the citizens want you to adopt. And so they present it to you. You have the ability to say, okay, petitioners, you're right, and change whatever you did, or adopt the ordinance they wanted adopted. And if not, then it goes out and it's got to be placed on the ballot and all of that. So that's a whole procedure.
Now, here was a question that came up. Before there were ballot issues and we decided not to hear them, or we would hear them, they would be presented to us. And the question is, once you have that number, you've hit that threshold, it's required to be put on the agenda for us to discuss.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, does it go on a referendum if we don't put it on the agenda? Or does it go on the versus you bring it up, you put it on the agenda, we take action and vote it down. Does it then go on the agenda?
If you don't take action, it's deemed to be that you've denied their petition.
And it goes on the agenda, it goes on the ballot?
Yes.
But
Now,
they get
if you
the
do take
1,200
action and
if they
vote
get
it
the-
down,
It goes on you either have to
approve it,
approve it or it goes on the ballot. And if
Okay.
you don't do anything, it's deemed to be a denial.
and it goes on the ballot either way, okay.
It's deemed what? It's deemed what?
As if we
deemed to be a
denied it, it goes on the
denial,
ballot,
it
it
goes
goes
Yeah,
either way.
and then if they have 1,300 signatures, then they can put it on the ballot.
Right.
At the next election cycle.
They could choose under the procedure that we adopted, I think we left this in, if they want to pay the cost for a special election.
And they have to do all that.
Then they have to pay for it
Right.
for incur the cost. The committee.
Does the city have to pay for it if it's in the normal election cycle?
That's the way
The city has to pay for it.
But David, you supplied us with numbers that
The
if they
incremental-
choose to do it,
Yeah.
it was 600 and some odd thousand.
Correct, so right around there for a mail-in ballot only.
For a mail-in ballot election, they would have to pay 600 and some odd $1,000 for a mail-in
David,
ballot.
what if it goes on the regular election? There was like a-
600,000?
600 and some odd
Yeah, it's
thousand.
expensive
There's
to
something
do a
wrong
mail
with
ballot
that.
election.
Yeah, I can pull the numbers, I'll get them.
So, Mayor, something like 315 is, to me, very important. I want to make sure when the board met with the Council of Civic Associations, was this thoroughly discussed? I mean, this is a
Multiple
big change, and I'm hoping that will we be able to hear from the council today? Will we be able to hear from anyone?
Well,
on this?
this meeting's going to end in a few minutes because we have an afternoon meeting, our conference meeting.
Will we be able to hear from any of the other board members on the Charter Revision Board or anybody, or just?
Well, we started late,
Okay.
so we're going to have to continue this at another workshop. So, but this has been good. We've fleshed out a lot of the subjects and a lot of the issues. I think we've gotten through.
Have we gotten through all the cleanup ones?
No.
We have our deadline is June 10th. So we have like one
We have
more-
another meeting.
That's if we decide that we even want to put something on.
Well, if
the
we want to
ballot.
I
the
agree, but I
cleanup
mean, we
thing.
have another week, we have another meeting. Would it be okay if we asked the board to continue this workshop at the same time as, right before the next city commission meeting? Are you amenable to that?
Do we have any other?
June 4th or 5th? June 4th.
No, don't we have the Infrastructure Task Force joint meeting that day?
Yes.
Well, that isn't as time sensitive. We may have to postpone that. Do you mind?
Well, there you go.
Well, it may have to. I mean, yeah, I know, but I'm just saying this is time sensitive. Okay, thank you.
And I think it's important for everyone to understand, too, we didn't just discuss
not
this
my
at
fault.
one meeting. Every item that you see basically was discussed at multiple meetings, because we would make our recommendations, and then Paul would come back and redo with us at the following meeting the way it was rewritten, and then we would have discussions again.
No one's disagreeing with that. It's just that there's definitely a sense of the public has not really had a chance to be at the table on this at all. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
I
but
disagree, because it's no different than the process you use with your own commission meetings.
This is our Constitution.
You have a commission agenda that comes out, sometimes with 1,000 pages in backup, comes out on Wednesday, Thursday. You do your pre-agenda meeting on Monday, and you vote on Tuesday.
This is nothing
So-
to rush. This is something
Well,
that needs to be thoroughly vetted.
I
This
think
needs
all
to be-
those other
Ma'am, can I
items
just
on
finish?
commission
Am
agendas are similar.
Can I ever just finish the sentence? That'd be
Can I
wonderful if
make a
I could just
statement?
finish the sentence.
Can I make a statement,
Yeah,
Mayor?
go ahead, please. Ms.
I
Scott.
said nothing. I prepared some comments because I thought that we would all get a chance to speak in the beginning. So may I read it, please?
We're not going to have time to hear your comments today, but we can hear your comments, just not today.
Yeah, I will be gone at the
I
next
will
meeting.
invite you, though, to submit your comments to the members of the commission if you want, but we have another meeting we have to begin in 15 minutes. So, and the reason why I'm being a stickler about it, because there's Dr. Zeman wants to make his presentation with regard to the school board issues, and he has to be out of here by 2 o'clock. So everyone's in a hurry and everyone's got places to go, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful of what you have to submit. I want to give it a full-throated discussion, and I'm hoping that we can do it at the next city commission workshop, which I hope can take place before the next city commission meeting, which
There's
is
two of us that are probably not going to be here.
You're not going to be here.
I'm going to be gone until the 4th or 5th. Richard's gone too.
June 4th I can do.
Wait, say that again, Richard.
June 4th I can do.
What's the date of the next meeting? June 4th. Yeah, June 4th. So you'll be here.
Yes.
Jackie, you can't be here?
I'm looking.
It's Tuesday.
Yeah, I fly back on the 5th.
Mayor,
You fly back on the 5th.
No, I wanted to make some comments, but I can live without
All right, go
making
ahead.
them.
Go ahead. Go
Well,
ahead.
I'm just going to read to you what I had written. Just take a minute. It's to the mayor, vice mayor, commissioners, and my fellow board members. As both a member of the public and now a board member, I'm deeply concerned about the overwhelming negative comments regarding the commission, the city manager, the city's actions. My intention in joining this board was to contribute to the overall charter revision if necessary, not to engage in political disputes. When I raised my concern about lobbyists serving on advisory boards, I was informed that it might be addressed later. However, I'm uncertain when or if this committee intends to ever hear the public input on that or any other issues that are other than our regular meetings. Despite speaking about this at our last meeting, the board position was to meet with you first. If you decide to consider placing any recommendations on the November 5th ballot, the board would then hold workshops. To me, this process seems backwards. The public should be educated and be informed first so they can provide input to you as the commissioners before you make any decisions. For the past year, the public has complained about a lack of transparency and adequate input. Therefore, I don't believe the Charter Revision Board should recommend changes without more public engagement. If you review the minutes of all of our meetings, it has been stated numerous times that we would have public meetings to gather input. To the best of my knowledge, we have not done that. I have twice recommended moving our meetings to a location that's more central, where we can offer live streaming in order for more accessibility for the public. FXE does not have the ability for live stream, and the location is challenging for some people in Districts 2, 3, and 4. Perhaps we could relocate our meetings here and provide live streaming and better accessibility. My fellow board members are dedicating many hours to this work, but rushing this process now would be a mistake. I do not see any urgent need to place items on the ballot aside from the potential political motivations. Let's avoid making this political and instead do the right thing. Ensure the public understands and participates fully in the process. Thank you.
All right, so thank you for your comments.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry to
Yes,
interrupt.
Mr.
If I
Ansel.
may,
Yes.
Paul Bangel is weighing in because of the timing of things. The next meeting would be used to call, a resolution would have to be adopted to call the election, number one. And number two, we would need the ballot questions to be adopted by ordinance by that meeting. That means we have to sit there and pick whatever questions you want on the ballot, confine them to no more than 65 words, and that has to be at the next meeting for the first reading. You're not going to make this.
No, we're not going to make it. No, I don't understand why we're having a gun to our head to have ballot initiatives in November. What you just explained, that's almost an impossibility. Again, I'm going to repeat myself. This is why I asked for this joint meeting 7 months ago. That's all.
With that being said, keep in mind something. The only urgency would be for this November election, and whatever we do is not going to affect this November election. It's going to affect us 4 years from now. So maybe we do not need to meet in June because we're not going to make the deadline.
Well, there's some things that I think are pretty straightforward.
But they're not time sensitive.
What's that?
They're not that time sensitive.
Well, they're not time sensitive, I guess, but
you can do it in 2020, 26. You could do it. And I mean,
no, I agree with you. This is too important a process to just rush through like this. It's just too important, and I think that we just need to engage the community a lot more, and we have to just be more transparent with these items. Even half of them that we've talked about tonight amongst ourselves today, rather, we are deferring because we still need a little bit more clarification, a little bit more discussion, and that work needs to just continue. That's all. November 5th is not the end all be all.
Madam Chairman, is there anything on here that is?
I think it's very important to clarify the record. We are not live streamed because Marine Advisory Board is live streamed. Therefore, the city has us on YouTube. So we are public meetings. We are always public meetings. We are advertised meetings. Our minutes are posted on the web. They can see it on YouTube. It's advertised with open people able to attend our meetings. So let's make sure the public clearly understands they are always public meetings. No one has violated anything dealing with sunshine or anything else by alluding to that we haven't held public meetings. I think that's very important.
No, we're not.
Madam Chairman, question. Is there anything on here that is time sensitive that has to be, that really should be done?
I think that's a question for the board. Chris?
Chris?
Here's the problem. We thought it'd be better for the voters to see this in chunks, because if we continue on and we hit 65, 70, whatever the issues are, how are you going to put 70 items on any kind of ballot? So we think that it's incumbent upon the city commission to look at some of the ones. At least let's clear the easy ones. Get them on.
Okay,
get them
so
off.
Chris,
I'm not, actually, Mayor, may I please? Just because I've been wanting to make that point for the last hour plus. I've been through a lot of these through the years, and I know from experience that if you've got more than 4 or 5 things on there, what's going to happen is voter fatigue sets in, and they just vote no on everything. If people don't know what's going on, they will vote no just out of a knee-jerk reaction. I've seen this over and over and over again. I think that you're absolutely right. We need to have 4 to 5 items on the ballot this year. Otherwise, we're going to wind up with 20 on the ballot next year or 2 years from now, and that does a grave disservice. And then I think it will wind up with a much worse outcome than if we just take a couple now, continue the work of the board, bring a few more back for our midterm elections, and adopt a few then. I'd like to see this move forward with the work that the board has done. They put a lot of time into this, and I would, as I started out my comments earlier on, and I will reiterate them. The problem with the public is they don't care about this. That's why they don't show up to the meetings.
No,
unfortunately.
No, I can't. No, that statement's
Do you
not a
know
good
how
statement.
many meetings I have sat through in the last 18 years for the Charter Revision Board?
No, the public is very
Lots of
busy.
them.
People have very busy lives, Commissioner. That's an unfair statement to say they don't care. They might not be able to attend, or they might be busy, but to say they don't care, I disagree. People are very busy. They can't go to, look how many boards and committees we have. Look how many meetings we have. How can a person be expected to go to all of those types of meetings? It's incumbent upon us to, again, make sure that we have a charrette, we have a workshop, we have a town hall, we have whatever you want to call it, and we invite the public so that, and we pay particular attention to the fact that this is for the public to understand changes that we're proposing to the charter. But I don't think it's fair to say that people don't care and they don't go to the meetings. I just don't.
So whenever I watch one of these FDOT meetings where they're talking about changes to a road or changes to anything, and they do those meetings online, they are packed with people. You know why? Because people care. So when people don't show up, when people don't watch it on TV, when they're not interested, yeah, I think they don't care. It's unfortunate, but that is the nature of this. This is the most dry, boring stuff in the world, except for those of us that are working inside the Beltway here. Okay. So we know what this is. We know why it's important, but candidly, we've never been able to engage the public in all the years I've done this.
Okay, John.
We actually had more public activities.
John and Steve, you're both right. John, you have an opinion that they don't care. Steve, your opinion they're busy. You're both entitled, and I think both of you are correct. So, but right. Tom, I have a bigger question. Time frame. Do we have to have 2 readings? Do we have to take action tonight on something? So we're going to have to, tonight we're going to have to take action on something to get it under the...
If you want to get anything done for this coming ballot, you're going to have to at least pick 4 or 5 tonight to give us to work on for wording the ballot questions.
Oh, so Gene, we have to have something coming out of this for tonight.
Have a special meeting between now and June 4, or you pick tonight what you want us to work up.
All right, so Tom, you know, the thing is that I'm not hearing consensus on anything here today, other than the fact that we haven't even gone through the entire presentation.
Right.
So
keep working.
May I recommend, first of all, that we at least have a second meeting with the advisory board, and let's do it on right before the next scheduled city commission meeting. Let's ask the infrastructure task force if we can delay their meeting.
No. Look at the calendar.
I have to finish speaking.
But it does. Okay. But I will. It doesn't make sense.
Please. Let's ask the infrastructure task force if we can postpone their meeting by 1 meeting, and at least have the opportunity to speak together as a commission and review all this with the board, because we just touched the surface here. And a lot of these things, some of these things are ministerial, I agree, but other things have consequences that we haven't really fully appreciated.
Dean,
yeah.
Let me point, look at If we're going to do it that way, we miss November, and if we miss November, there's no rush to bump the infrastructure task force at that particular point.
Would we miss November if we put, Tom?
Yes.
If we,
Yes.
That's what he just said.
There's no reason to bump infrastructure.
And what about all of the other cleanup items that are listed on the other memorandums that I've been referencing? That easy cleanup items that are just not included in this.
You won't get to them.
I know. That's why I don't understand.
Well, you want to discuss this evening when we make a resolution? We can take a few things, like a couple very important things, touch upon.
if someone wants to
then they'll
do
be
a
gone.
walk-on resolution tonight, that's your prerogative.
Just a couple
I
pieces
don't know.
of it.
I don't know what it's going to be, but we're not going to decide it right now. If you individually want to meet with our city attorney and we want to prepare a walk-on resolution, that's your prerogative. I don't see. I have to agree with the vice mayor and others. I think even Pamela agrees that we still have a lot more to think about and to discuss than to just rush this.
But
So,
either way, we don't need to bump infrastructure because it's not going to.
let's take on one issue at a time. I think that we really need to focus on. This is our charter. I mean, the founding fathers went through a whole summer before they figured out a constitution. So let's.
But they'll be gone.
I don't disagree with you, Dean. I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying.
So again, not having met before today and not having transmitted recommendations back and forth, that's water under the dam right now. We can't fix that, but we can make a decision as to how we're going to move forward on this. And I think that we need like I said, if you want to put something on the agenda for tonight as a walk-on, that's your prerogative. I just truly feel this is premature, and it doesn't. And I think it's demeaning to the work of this board to not fully address everything that they have recommended, and we haven't even gotten halfway through it. So anyway, I think that we're going to adjourn this workshop, and I think that we need to think about reconvening it at our next city commission meeting.
Tom, I have one question for you as the city attorney. One of the issues that we addressed is just to bring us in compliance with the special act, which is state law, which is the Broward Act of Elections, which then would say about when the swearing in would transpire, unlike the situation we went through last November. So since that is a special act that governs and supersedes anything here anyhow, then we wouldn't have to worry about that particular item making it for the November agenda. Is that correct?
Well, we still need to, you talk about amending the charter. I need an ordinance to amend the charter, which takes 2 readings. And now I'm in the compression of the supervisor of elections. It's taking over us. I don't think you're going to get any of this done unless something is done tonight.
But how about if something was done by ordinance, because it was done by ordinance, it wasn't done by the charter?
I don't know if that would have to be the charter or an ordinance. I don't know the answer.
Okay.
All right, we're going to recess this workshop, and can we all agree on the next meeting be at the June 5th? June 4th, excuse me.
There's no reason. I mean, for a joint workshop,
Yeah.
no reason.
No, it won't help.
whatsoever.
It won't help.
It won't help. It does you no good.
There's a consensus here that I think that this is just rushed, and there's no
Right.
reason to even do that.
I mean, you're not going to make the deadline, so there's no reason
Right.
to bump
Okay,
anything.
all right.
Right.
Well, then the workshop's concluded, and we'll have to figure out where we go from there.
Okay, thank you.